custody has two enemies. One is theft, so someone else gains authority to your secret. Predictable key generation is what happened at Coldcard. Malware, an insider job, some inside compromise, physical extraction of the secret. The other is loss, and that's the other thing that we have to be careful of. We have to make these tools easy. We have to make them accessible, because if they're too complicated, people are going to lose the Bitcoin. Really good Bitcoin custody both keeps Bitcoin inaccessible to attackers and recoverable by its rightful owner. That's like the way that I would think about storing Bitcoins myself, which is, what are we doing to prevent attackers, and what are we doing to ensure recoverability by its owners?
The crypto industry is going through one of its most serious security breaches in recent memory. What started as a single vulnerability buried inside a hardware wallet's firmware has now snowballed into one of the largest targeted Bitcoin thefts ever seen. In just a matter of days, attackers have systematically drained thousands of wallets, with losses climbing from roughly $30 million to well over $100 million as new waves of theft continue to unfold. The Bitcoin network wasn't hacked. The wallets weren't physically broken into. Instead, criminals exploited a flaw that should never have existed in the first place: weak randomness used to generate users' recovery seeds. What's especially alarming is that many of the victims believed they were following Bitcoin security best practices. They purchased dedicated hardware wallets, generated their recovery phrases offline, and assumed their coins were protected. But because of a historical firmware bug affecting certain Coldcard devices, attackers were able to dramatically reduce the mathematical complexity of those recovery phrases, recreate likely seed combinations entirely offline, compare them against public blockchain data, and automatically drain exposed wallets without ever touching the physical device itself. It's a chilling reminder that even products built specifically for security can fail if one critical assumption turns out to be wrong. The incident has forced the entire Bitcoin community to ask difficult questions. Is buying a hardware wallet enough? How much should you trust any single device? And if one layer of security fails, what systems should already be in place to make sure your Bitcoin remains safe? Those are exactly the questions Jack Mallers set out to answer in one of the most educational segments of his latest podcast, using the Coldcard incident as a real-world lesson in how Bitcoin custody actually works. If you find value in educational content like this, don't forget to like the video. Subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you never miss an update, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Now, let's hear what Jack Mallers has to say.
I think multisig is great. Strike uses geographically distributed multisig. But why I've never been religious about recommending things for others is because once you understand it's all it's about is generating a large enough and random enough number and securing that. Well, what's best? Well, depends. Depends on what you're trying to do. For example, I'll tell you guys this. If all you're trying to do is store Bitcoin and rarely, if ever, touch it or move it, you could just buy a laptop and run Bitcoin Core. Boom. Keep the laptop offline, never connect it to the internet. Like, spin up a Bitcoin Core node. By the way, when we talk about code bases that have been reviewed to death, like clearly not enough eyeballs were on the Coldcard firmware source code, right? There weren't enough people reviewing the Coldcard firmware. What's the most reviewed code base in the Bitcoin ecosystem? Bitcoin Core. That's why oftentimes my advice is like, listen, if you're not trying to do something fancy, because, let me say this. Coldcard had a lot of features and the features were great and people geeked out on the features and that's fine. But me, I use Strike if I need to send a lightning payment, if I need like a hot wallet for any reason. Obviously, I trust Strike because I built it. And when people say, do I self-custody? I mean, Strike is technically my custody. I have different custody than Strike, but I also use Strike to custody. So you can get why, I love Strike. And there's a lot of other Bitcoiners around the world. There's, millions of people that have Strike account and they do the same. So I wasn't on Coldcard, using all the features and doing all this crazy shit. I have cold storage just to store the coins. That's it. They just need to be protected. Bitcoin Core. Bitcoin Core. Why? One reason is because, like I said, it's the most audited, actively reviewed code base in the entire ecosystem. So this is the problem, is like, do you need a hardware wallet even? It depends on what you're doing. It depends. So let's get into some stuff. Multisig. So here's what you guys need to understand about multisig. Multisig changes the fact that once your secret is compromised, it's over. Whoever's able to recreate that secret or get access to that secret or find your secret, it's over. Because what multisig does, it requires multiple keys. So what is a very frequent solution is what's called a 2 of 3 multisig. And what this does is it requires 2 of the keys to move Bitcoin, not just a single one. So what you guys will hear as you are researching this and you're on Twitter, you'll hear people say single sig, multi-sig. Single sig is in reference to one large random number, and it's a single sig. So once it's signal signature. So once you are able to produce a signature because you have either guessed or stolen or hacked or whatever, that large random number, you're good. It's over. The Bitcoin is whoever is broadcasting that signature. Now, what multisig does, which is fascinating, is it requires 2. So if one of them is compromised, so let's say you had a multisig where you created one with a Coldcard, one with a ledger, one with a Trezor. You're good. Because yes, the Coldcard's compromised, but that's not 2. That's only 1. You need 2. You need the Coldcard and the ledger, or the Coldcard and the Trezor. And so you're okay. And so what this does is it addresses security in a slightly different way. It says, again, guys, remember, security is about humility. It's about being humble. It's about saying, what if something goes wrong? Or am I still going to be okay? And this is why I recommend multisig, and I think it's a great option. And geographically distributed multisig is what Strike uses to secure coins. You need multiple secrets to move the coins. And it can be as many as you want. There's 2 of 3, there's 3 of 5, 7 of 11. And what this does is it allows a key to be compromised. It allows one of these large random numbers to be stolen, theft, guessed, and you're still okay. That's why multi-sig is more redundant. Now, it's also more complicated. So some of the problem, now I have to be honest about the pros and cons. People have tried to set up multi-sig themselves, and they've accidentally set it up wrong, and all of a sudden your Bitcoin is locked away forever because you set up the software in a way that you can never move the Bitcoin ever again. So it's more complicated. Pros and cons to everything. That's why companies create solutions for this type of stuff. That's why Strike exists, okay? Experts can do it. But that's what multi-sig is. So again, single sig, 1 affected key, 1 signature required, you're toast. Multi-sig, if 1 key is affected, you still have the other 2. You're good. You can swap that 1 key out and life goes on. And then obviously, if 2 keys are affected in a 2 of 3 multi-sig, then the multi-sig fails. But the point is you're creating redundancy to failure. Because again, guys, being secure is all about, it's not about being perfect. It's about how can I create an environment where things can go wrong and I'll still be okay. You see? That's what being secure is. That's people, only the paranoid survive, right? What could possibly go wrong?
One of the biggest takeaways from Jack's explanation is that there isn't a universal custody solution that works for everyone. The best setup depends on how often you move your Bitcoin, how much technical knowledge you have, and how much complexity you're willing to manage. Security isn't about buying the most expensive hardware wallet or chasing the newest feature. It's about understanding the trade-offs between convenience, redundancy, and recoverability before something goes wrong. That naturally brings us to the next layer of the discussion. If multi-signature wallets protect against a single compromised key, what happens when you start distributing those keys across different people, locations, and systems? This is where Jack introduces concepts like key sharding and geographically distributed custody, explaining why professional Bitcoin security increasingly relies on multiple independent layers instead of trusting any single device.
Another thing you'll see is sharding. So sharding is, so you have these keys. So you could have a 2 of 3 multisig, and sharding is distributing the key itself. So it's one signing authority, so one key distributed across people, systems, locations. It changes like who can actually reach the key and how hard the key is to assemble to sign. So not only can you distribute the keys, you could say, I'm not going to have one key, I'm going to have many keys, and I'm going to require multiple keys just to move the Bitcoin. You could say, I'm not going to have one person own one key, I'm going to have 12 people combine, make up for one key, where you need at least 7 of the 12 people or something like this to make up one key. And then you need another 20 people to make up the second key. And so you can do very fancy things, which again, just implement fail safes, which just implement redundancy. What if something goes wrong? What if one person gets hacked? What if one person gets a gun to their head? So there are many ways to take these really large, really random numbers and protect them. Lastly, something to think about in regards to custody. Custody has 2 enemies, okay, to think about. One is theft. So someone else gains authority to your secret, okay? So predictable key generation is what happened at Coldcard. Malware, an insider job, some inside compromise, physical extraction of the secret. The other is loss, and that's the other thing that we have to be careful of. We have to make these tools easy. We have to make them accessible, because if they're too complicated, people are going to lose the Bitcoin, which happens. I mean, it doesn't happen as frequently anymore because the space, has gotten so much better with tooling and companies and projects. But back in the day, it was very easy to lose Bitcoins because if you set it up wrong, you're like, oh, crap, I set it up in a way where I can't move the Bitcoin because I don't have the right secret. You see? So really good Bitcoin custody both keeps Bitcoin inaccessible to attackers and recoverable by its rightful owner. That's like the way that I would think about storing Bitcoins myself, which is what are we doing to prevent attackers and what are we doing to ensure recoverability by its owners? And that's, well, let's multisig. Well, let's do key sharding. Well, let's do. And you're adding, that when I say geographically distributed, that's what I'm saying is like, well, what if you're able to keep these things in different places so that it's not all down to one geography? And so this slide, custody is a stack. It's not a product, okay? So you've got recovery, operations, key protection like sharding or geography or access. You've got multisig, and then the generation. And the generation, again, just a reminder, is where Coldcard is just generating. Like the severity of this issue and the level of error here, again, is hard to comprehend because you're like, well, where did they screw up? Was it in the operations? No. It was literally in generating a large enough and random enough number. It was like the very basics, Bitcoin 101 is where they messed up. Unfortunately, super sad for everyone involved. So it all comes down to strong enough, random enough number. From there, you build up. So in recap, in summary, the Bitcoin ledger records the Bitcoin, okay? The randomness makes this key unguessable. Multisig makes one key insufficient, and distributed control makes one person, machine, or location insufficient. Recovery makes failure survivable. Everything can be public except that one root secret. You got to get that part right.
The Coldcard exploit is still unfolding, and the numbers continue to paint a sobering picture. What initially appeared to be a $30 million incident has escalated through multiple coordinated waves of theft. Researchers monitoring blockchain activity have now linked the exploit to more than 1,800 Bitcoin stolen from over 5,000 addresses. Analysts have observed attackers sweeping vulnerable wallets at dozens of times the normal transaction rate, suggesting a highly organized operation using automated tooling to identify and empty exposed wallets as quickly as possible. But the bigger story extends beyond one hardware wallet. Across the digital asset industry, security teams are beginning to confront a new reality. Attackers are becoming faster, more sophisticated, and increasingly assisted by artificial intelligence. One recent example came from Boltz, the non-custodial Bitcoin bridge that enables users to swap between Bitcoin layers and stablecoins. Despite emphasizing that no customer funds were ever at risk thanks to its non-custodial architecture, the team made the difficult decision to suspend its swap service after months of increasingly aggressive AI-assisted probing of its infrastructure. According to the developers, multiple resourceful groups were continuously identifying weaknesses faster than a relatively small team could patch them. It's a warning that open-source Bitcoin services may be entering an entirely new security era, where automation gives attackers a significant advantage. That's why Jack's message is so important. Security isn't about assuming nothing will ever fail. It's about building systems that continue working even when something inevitably does. Whether that means using multisignature wallets, geographically separating keys, carefully planning recovery procedures, or simply choosing a custody method that matches your own technical ability, every Bitcoiner should approach self-custody with humility instead of overconfidence. In this space, paranoia isn't irrational. It's often your greatest defense. Always do your own research, understand exactly how your chosen custody solution works, and never assume that any product is completely immune from failure. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future Bitcoin and crypto analysis. Share this video with someone who self-custodies their Bitcoin. It could genuinely save them from making a costly mistake. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.